Thanks. Oh, thank you. I do have a squeaky voice, so if at any point you can't hear me, just give me a shout. Let me know. Yeah, so I think I was thinking back, I don't know when my first Thicket Forum was, but the first one was quite intense because the Veg Map was not that popular then. And I think it was really useful that the forum shouted at us and we listened, and it seems like the map has more use now, and I'm glad that we're moving in the right direction. It's not perfect yet, and that's exactly why I'm here, is that we want to keep iterations going and keep the versions coming, and so please keep the data coming. And so we're getting ready to release the next version, so that's 2024, and let me tell you more about it. Oh, where do I point it? There. Okay. So it's going to be the beta version, and I'll explain that a little bit later. So in addition to the when, where, and what the updates are, I'm also going to give you a quick recap of how we do the updates. So if you have any, you know where to send them, and then when the next release will be, and a few other things thrown in between. Okay, so the where and the what of the changes. So all the areas in red, pointy thing, where we've had changes in this upcoming version. So the whole of the Northwest also shouted at us, so we listened. So that's, most of them are just boundary changes, but there's 3 new ecosystem types, or vegetation types there. Then Vavenda Myombo, these are all mangroves, and then some corrections from the 2018 map, and then we have totally new forest polygons that weren't there in the Nangaberg, and then some small changes to Elam, Vericrete, Fynbos, and then new Strandveld types. Okay, if we dive a little bit deeper into how this affects the classification, so we've had 5 new Strandveld types, but as a result, they kicked out a Blomba Strandveld type because it was a much better description of what was there. There were just remnants left. And then these are our 3 new savanna types, and that's from the Northwest province. If we then zoom into, and these are really the types that affect the thicket area most in this iteration. These Strandveld types are mostly have affected. It comes from a paper, so thanks so much. So this kind of work is the sort of thing that we love and we grab onto. So Richard, Haley, Sean, and Adrian sent this paper to us, and they let us know that it was coming. And I got the paper, and it was the easiest change, because the proposal was just set up in a way that was so beautifully made that we could just send it to our committee to review, and the changes could be made so easily. So I'll talk about that later. We have a handbook that you can follow if you're proposing a change. But what they replaced is, so Southwestern Strandveld and Grootbos Strandveld replaced over portions of Oberberg Dune Strandveld. It still exists, but along the coast, there's portions that replace those. Then we have Grootkammer Dune Strandveld, replaced portions of Grootkammer Dune Thicket. Then St. Francis Dune Strandveld replaced portions of St. Francis Dune Thicket. I wish all our veg types could be named so nicely where things follow each other like that. And then we have Southeastern Strandveld, which replaces a small portion of Hartenbos Dune Thicket. And some people had alerted us to that, and it's so fortunate that this work then hopefully fixed some of those issues that people were having when they were using the map. Then a few other little things, those are errors, and this I take full responsibility for. When we brought things into the map, there were these less than 2 hectare pieces of fish music thicket left further inland. And sure, this looks like, oh, why bother? but you've heard Mapale talk about how I think it's the extent of occurrence gets affected. So the whole extent of the veg type was larger than it should have been in the last assessment. So now it will only be this area that would be in the calculation. So apologies for that. I hope it doesn't make a big difference to the assessment. Okay. And then the next thing is, again, little small errors. When we brought the thicket into the map, there were these little slivers of types, mostly Albany alluvial vegetation and a few other fynbos things. It shouldn't make a big difference, but again, it'll affect little things. Then, what I didn't mention is that the vegetation map now forms part of a family of maps. So it goes all the way from the terrestrial, the estuarine, and then into the marine. And what that means is now, when we make changes, there's a conversation. In the last map, you would have noticed these things called estuarine habitats. But then we had estuarine habitat, what were some of the things? Salt marshes. And what they did is the estuarine team at NMU published a really nice estuary habitat layer, but we embedded it in the veg map. And although it makes sense that it's vegetation, it was problematic because we released in 2018, they released in 2019, and we had a much earlier version of their map. So for this iteration, we said, let's just send people to their data set. They have their own page on BJS now. And so all you'll see in the veg map is the outline of all their habitat area. And it just says estuarine habitat, and we send you to their map. All right. So this is really exciting. The only thing we still have within the estuaries is the mangroves. And I'd really love you to use or interact with this because it's the first time we're trying to add what's used to be there. So in general, the veg map is a potential vegetation map. So it's what could be there if there was no infrastructure. But for forests, for the most part, because it's so difficult to map what was there, we map what the current time point. So if you see a forest, it should represent where a forest is. But we know that a lot of our forests are increasing because of lack of fire, because of infrastructure so close to the forests. So we would want to reflect that in, for example, for Mapale's assessment, we wouldn't want to say that forests are where they have always been. We would want to reflect that that's actually a sign of, I don't want to use the word degradation like Stephanie's work, but it is a change from what it was. So what we did is we went and we worked very closely with the NMU team. We worked with historical imagery. So there you'll see there were just a few individuals in 1997, but then that's been increasing and we have quite a dense area of mangroves. So is that better or worse? I'm not sure. That's Mapale and Stephanie's problem to decide. I just do the mapping. And but what you also see is that this is quite a big increase. So we always assume that we're having loss, but we would also want to capture where there's change towards more. So this was the St. Lucia estuary. Historically, there was this wonderfully big lagoon type thing, and then a little mouth, and then they added a berm and they punched through the land here. And so what you started getting is this population of mangroves that started populating that area. And then because of the dynamics of the system that changed, you started getting this big block of mangrove, which, adds a lot of area for the country's total extent of mangrove. Because usually they're quite small. You can see they were small patches. So if you look at the map at the moment, there's this new field called Epoch Mangrove, because we only have it for mangroves. And all the red, the green areas are areas where there's mangrove that's grown. The blue areas are where there were mangroves and still are mangroves. And I didn't add the red areas. So these areas, which are technically in the ocean, are where there were these bits of mangroves that were there but have now been removed. So you'll see fields. Oh dear. Okay. So other things with the Veg Map is I mentioned that we have this database. So we basically took the book and we put it into a database, and we have the old stuff that's from the book, which I want to put on a platform that I can share. But there's additional fields like fire and things which we don't actually have data for in the Veg Map book. But there's awesome data that I heard here from like Craig and Rina and all of these people. We'd want to add that information to the descriptions of the type. And then there's the iNaturalist project, which we definitely mentioned before, but if you want to have more information, speak to Kagiso. With that project is still going. We get all sorts of cool data, like the condition of the habitat, and then we get the picture, and we get a GPS coordinate. Okay. Quickly, Richard mentioned a few times that we want to take the thicket global. The thicket is already going global. People recognize it in the IUCN framework, which gets used in the assessment, but they also described these higher level ecosystem classification groups. So if you look at their system, our ecosystem types sit sort of there, or sit sort of here within their groups, but they've asked South Africa, because our data is so nice and ready and easy to use and can be fit into their system, they've asked us to, they use this word crosswalk, which basically says, can you fit your ecosystem types into our classes? These are their classes. So they sit higher up in our classification system. And what we did is it's a massive table with all our ecosystem types, and then we said, well, so for example, for let's take a bondveld. Our bondveld fits somewhat in grasslands, and so a percentage of it fits in there, and then our grassland thicket, a percentage in grasslands, but most of the thicket types fits inside this class that Stephanie mentioned, T1.2, which is subtropical, tropical dry forests and scrubs. But what my appeal to you here is to please help us, because we just did a first pass and we really need this community to help review that. So I'd like to have an online little workshopy thing, so if anybody's interested, please let me know, and then we can, it's basically going, this is nonsense. Double drift carrot thicket is mostly in the tropical dry forest. Don't put it in with the karui types that they have on that list. And the reason this is important, that we'd like to get it right, is it's going up into the IUCN information for the descriptions of the types, but they're also doing this cool stuff. There's this thing called the Global Ecosystem Atlas, where they're trying to collect all of the ecosystem maps from around the world, and they're trying to put it onto this one platform. So when they do these global analyses, you know the stuff that we complain about where they say, but they didn't ask us for our data. So they're trying to avoid that, where if anyone's doing global analyses, we go, all our data from us is on the system, you can use it from there. So that's the idea, and we would want our information reflected nicely in these spaces. So yeah. Okay, quickly how we have a VegMap project handbook. Email me if you want to have updates and you want to see what the details of those are. We've tried to make our process transparent. All our data basically comes from you, and so please do keep talking to us. The important stuff, when will the next version of the map be out? It's currently with our team for them to test basically if there's geometry errors, if it breaks during the testing, if they're going to do their work. Then hopefully in the first week of July, I'll put the beta version up. That will stay up for about 6 months. And if you can then test whether it makes sense, whether I've made any errors, keep shouting at me. Shout at me if there's an issue. And then hopefully by the end of the year we can correct those errors, and then next year we can finally upload onto Beegis. A note on Beegis, I know it's not working. I hope you're shouting at them. So what we're going to do is the beta version with all the technical plots and the spatial layers, we're going to put it onto a Google Drive, and then I'll send the link to Alistair as soon as it's up, and then he can share it with the forum. Okay, and very important, we've finished an update, but please continue to send us anything else, so that will go into the next version. Okay, and then just a quick reminder, I know lots of people hate the word Albany thicket. So as Mr. Seen, I've just called it thicket because I want to avoid issues. So I know you're still thinking about the name, but please help us resolve the name in the Veg Map. We don't want it to come from us, we want it to come from you. So I put it into ChatGPT just to see what it says. I put in the word create an image of Albany thicket in South Africa, and you can see it came up with a few fynbossy things, some thicket things, some, as it should say, degraded thickets, so savanna stuff. And I thought, that's not such a good name, of course. And then I put in create an image of subtropical thicket, and that looks more like the valley thickets, our music thickets. So we know where the ChatGPT lies in terms of this equation. But yeah. Please continue to discuss it and let us know what you would like reflected in the Veg Map. And yeah, contact us. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Anisha. Thanks for you managed to squeak in time, so we got enough question. And I do feel incredibly bad because the Veg Map we did a whole bunch of changes, and we left they did leave the name open. And we do have an opportunity to call it something like subtropical succulent thicket, but I should have made time to discuss it at this forum, and I think it's something that maybe we can discuss online on the WhatsApp group as like a post-conference discussion in terms of let's propose some names and think about it, and then we can maybe vote within. We actually, as the forum, the Veg Map Committee is happy to take our recommendations for what it should be called. And there's going to be questions, I'm sure. So I just want to highlight that. Any one or two burning questions? I just want to say, if you do come across anything that's wrong with the Veg Map, Anisha is amazing with taking feedback and changing things and sorting it out. I'm very embarrassed about my first interaction with the Veg Map Committee and Anisha, because the forum sent me to go storm in there and say that the Veg Map was completely ruined thicket, which it had. But then their response was to put me on the Veg Map Committee, and we then had to all fix it. We were part of fixing it, but it was a really great collaborative effort, and that's all led by Anisha and this kind of willingness to make sure that Veg Map is always seen as a draft and is just being improved upon all the time. Cool. I'm going to leave it there if there are no questions. Thanks very much, Anisha.